picture this. It's a spring day in Omaha, Nebraska, back in 1986.
Okay.
Kids are outside, just playing.
Yeah.
World feels a little slower, a little safer.
Mm-hmm.
But for the Chadic family, that sense of security is going to be completely shattered.
Mm.
This is the story of 11-year-old Ricky Chadic III. A boy who vanished, leaving behind a bicycle, a heartbroken mother, and a mystery that has haunted this city for almost 40 years.
You know what's really eerie about this case is the way it just brings up this primal fear. You know, that fear of a child going missing?
Right.
And it happened in a very normal place.
Yeah.
A bank parking lot, not some shadowy back alley or anything like that.
Right.
And that just makes it even more unsettling.
Exactly. And today we're going to examine the disappearance and tragic death of Ricky Chadic III, a case that has just left more questions than answers.
It really has.
We've got eyewitness accounts, mysterious vehicles, forensic evidence, and even like whispers of a possible confession.
A confession? Wow.
So
Well, what we're going to try to do today is go through all of that.
Yeah.
Try to understand what happened to Ricky.
Yeah.
We'll look at the investigation and the key players and the questions that still remain about this case.
Okay, so let's start by setting the scene. Omaha, Nebraska in 1986. It was a different time.
Oh, yeah. Completely different time.
Kids played outside until the streetlights came on, and parents had this sense of safety that, sadly, many communities don't have today.
Yeah, you're right. And in this picture, we have Ricky Chadic III, an 11-year-old boy, loved G.I. Joe, building with Legos, and get this, collecting ATM receipts.
ATM receipts. That's a unique hobby.
It is. It shows you that this was just a normal kid, right?
Yeah.
A kid with his own interests. We have to remember this is a real boy. And he had a family who loved him very much.
Absolutely. And that family's world came crashing down on March 23rd, 1986.
Oh, wow.
Ricky had called his mom, Teresa, from a friend's house, saying he would be home a little later than usual.
So this is before cell phones, right?
Right. Long before cell phones were common. So
Yeah.
when a child said they'd be home at a certain time, you expected them to be there.
Yeah.
There wasn't that constant communication we have today.
That's right.
So when Teresa woke up from a nap and Ricky wasn't home, a mother's intuition kicked in.
Yeah,
Of course. She started to retrace his usual route, which included a shortcut to the Omaha National Bank parking lot, which, ironically, Ricky liked because of its ATM.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This is where the story takes its first, chilling turn.
Okay.
Teresa finds Ricky's bike in the bank parking lot, not just tossed aside, but really carefully placed between a dumpster and its enclosure. Almost as if someone was trying to hide it from view.
Oh, that's creepy.
Right. This isn't just a kid forgetting his bike.
Yeah,
This suggests something much more deliberate, something much more sinister.
absolutely. And it set off alarm bells for Teresa. You see, she was the daughter of a retired homicide detective, Bob Chamberlain, and she knew that something was wrong.
Yeah, it's like having that investigative instinct ingrained in you.
Right.
She knew this wasn't a child wandering off.
Exactly. And because of her background and her father's connections to law enforcement, the police immediately suspected foul play. They didn't wait that typical 24 hours that's often advised in these cases. They knew time was of the essence.
So the investigation started quickly.
Yeah.
FBI gets involved, State Patrol called in, and right away a theme emerges. A blue pickup truck. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a blue truck near the bank around the time of Ricky's disappearance.
Okay, now we always have to be careful with eyewitness accounts, especially with something as generic as a blue pickup truck.
Right?
It's like finding a needle in a haystack, right? But there's one account that stands out.
Oh, tell me about that.
A firefighter stationed across from the bank reported seeing a boy matching Ricky's description near a blue truck in the parking lot. And this is the haunting part.
Okay.
He also recalled hearing a child's cry for help.
A cry for help. Oh, that is scary.
At the time, he dismissed it as kids just playing, which isn't unusual in a situation like that. But knowing what we know now, it's hard not to wonder if that was Ricky's voice. A desperate plea that went unnoticed.
It's just one of those details, the what-ifs that just plague these cases.
Yeah.
What if that firefighter had investigated further?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And in this case, it adds another layer of frustration to the investigation. They had surveillance footage from the bank's ATM, But this was 1986.
Right.
The technology wasn't what it is today.
Right, we're talking grainy VHS tapes, not high-definition digital recordings.
Exactly. So even though the footage was reviewed extensively, it didn't provide any definitive clues. It was just shadowy figures and lots of unanswered questions.
I can only imagine how frustrating that was. So what did they do? Did they have any leads to go on?
Well, they started by interviewing people in Ricky's life,
Okay.
trying to establish a timeline, looking for anything that might point them in the right direction. They even spoke to one of Teresa's ex-boyfriends who had made some unsettling comments about Ricky in the past.
Unsettling comments, that's certainly a red flag.
It was. And it led investigators down a certain path. But it didn't pan out.
So for 8 agonizing days, the search for Ricky continued.
Yeah.
Posters were put up, volunteers combed the area, and Teresa held on to hope that her son would be found safe. But then, on March 31st, a farmer made a grim discovery while plowing his field about 20 miles from the bank.
20 miles. Wow.
Okay.
Ricky's body was found face down in a ditch, fully clothed and in shockingly pristine condition. Pristine condition? What do you mean by that?
It was like his clothes had been recently laundered.
Really?
Yeah, it was a detail that immediately struck investigators as strange.
Yeah.
It just raised a lot of unsettling questions.
So it's almost like whoever did this was trying to, clean him up or erase evidence.
Right.
It's a very bizarre and disturbing detail.
Exactly, and that theory was further fueled by the autopsy findings.
Okay.
No obvious signs of trauma, no signs of a struggle.
Huh.
Most curiously, there were ligature marks on his neck.
Which suggested what the medical examiner described as a gentle strangulation.
Gentle strangulation? That seems like a contradiction.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it speaks to a level of control, like a methodical approach. It's both chilling and perplexing.
Huh.
And there's another strange detail.
Okay.
The medical examiner also noted that it appeared Ricky had been fed a healthy meal before his death.
So we have this picture emerging of someone who maybe was trying to care for Ricky, but ultimately ended his life in a brutal and calculated way. It's a very jarring juxtaposition.
It is. It really challenges how we typically think about a perpetrator's motives and actions. It adds another layer of complexity to this already puzzling case.
Now, you mentioned that Ricky loved building with Legos. Does that come into play at all in the investigation?
Yeah, it did. You see, Ricky would often carry his Legos in a small wooden box.
Okay.
And when his backpack was found near his body, the box was missing.
That missing wooden box has become almost symbolic of this case.
It really has. It's a tangible object, something physical that connects us to Ricky and to the mystery of his disappearance. If they found it, it could hold crucial clues. Imagine if it had fingerprints or a trace of DNA, or even just something that gave us more information about those missing 8 days.
It's a haunting reminder that even in really ordinary objects, there could be extraordinary significance. So as the years went by, did investigators ever get any closer to finding out who was responsible for Ricky's death?
They chased down a lot of leads, some more promising than others. One person of interest was Charles Miller, a former sheriff's deputy with a history of pedophilia.
That certainly fits the profile of someone capable of committing this kind of crime.
On the surface, yeah. And Miller had lived near the area where Ricky was abducted. But after a lot of investigation, his DNA was ruled out, and he was cleared as a suspect.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even when things seem to line up, we can't jump to conclusions. Solid evidence is crucial.
Absolutely. And in this case, there was another really interesting lead. This one came from an unexpected place, a bar.
A bar?
Yeah, a man reportedly confessed or heavily implied his involvement in Ricky's murder to a complete stranger.
A confession in a bar?
Yeah.
That sounds like something out of a movie.
It does, but unfortunately, the witness could only give a partial description of the man, and despite their best efforts, police were never able to find him.
It's a classic case of so close, yet so far.
Exactly. It's one of those frustrating situations where it feels like a breakthrough is within reach, but ultimately it slips away.
Now, I understand that forensic technology has advanced a lot since 1986. Did any of those advancements help in Ricky's case?
To an extent, yeah.
Okay.
You see, a single hair was found on Ricky's body.
Okay.
And back then, DNA technology was in its infancy.
Right.
But they were able to get a partial DNA profile from that hair.
That must have been a huge step forward at the time.
Oh, it was. But there was a problem. The sample was completely used up during testing, so they couldn't retest it with more advanced technology we have now.
So it's like having a piece of a puzzle, but not being able to fit it in because it's damaged.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And there's no guarantee that the hair belonged to the perpetrator. It could have come from anyone, a first responder, a passerby, even contamination at the crime scene.
So even with this partial DNA profile, the mystery remained.
Yeah, it did. And it led investigators down another path. This one involves a high-profile abduction case from Indiana, the April Tinsley case.
I've heard of that case. Didn't it also involve a blue truck?
It did. There are a lot of similarities.
Mhm.
Both cases had blue trucks, abductions around Easter, and bodies found near farmland.
Okay.
And April Tinsley's killer, John D. Miller, was eventually identified through genealogy in 2018. So investigators wanted to see if there could be a connection.
Yeah, I can see why they'd explore that. So did they find any evidence linking Miller to Nebraska in 1986?
They got in touch with the detective who worked on the April Tinsley case, and he said that John D. Miller was definitely in Indiana in 1986, so they ruled him out as a suspect.
So another dead end, but at least they were very thorough in their investigation.
Yeah, absolutely. Leaving no stone unturned is really important in cases like this. But unfortunately, despite all their effort, the trail just went cold. Years turned into decades, and those answers Teresa wanted so badly just remained elusive.
It's heartbreaking to think about all the pain and uncertainty she must have gone through.
It really is, but through it all, she never gave up hope. She became an advocate for her son, kept his memory alive, and encouraged anyone with information to come forward.
So where does that leave the investigation today? Is there any hope that Ricky's case will ever be solved?
Well, the Douglas County Sheriff's Office is still actively investigating. They're following up on any leads that come in. And even though the trail has gone cold, there is always the chance that something could come up. A clue, a memory, even a twinge of conscience. Something that could lead to a breakthrough.
Yeah, it's that hope, however faint, that keeps families like the Chadics going. The hope that one day they'll finally get those answers.
Exactly. And that's why cases like Ricky's are important to revisit. By keeping these stories in the public consciousness, we just might be able to jog someone's memory or inspire someone to come forward with information they've held on to for too long. So let's take a minute to consider what we've learned so far. We have a young boy abducted in broad daylight, seemingly treated with some bizarre mix of cruelty and care, and then just left in a remote area like someone was trying to cover their tracks.
It's a case that really defies easy explanations. It challenges how we understand human behavior, how those really dark and really compassionate impulses can exist in a person. And it just leaves us with so many questions. Who would do something like this? And why? What happened to Ricky during those 8 days?
Those are questions that investigators and people who've been following this case have been asking for years. It's like a puzzle with missing pieces, a story without an ending.
And that missing wooden box, could it hold the key to solving this mystery? Is it out there somewhere, waiting to be discovered?
It's certainly possible. And if anyone listening knows anything about Ricky's case, we really urge you to contact the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. Even if it seems small, your tip could be that missing piece that finally brings justice for Ricky and closure for Teresa.
It's cases like Ricky's that really make you appreciate those everyday moments with your loved ones, right?
Yeah.
We take for granted that our kids will come home from school or that we'll see them at dinner, that life will just go on as normal.
Right.
But for Teresa Chadic, that was shattered.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder
Yeah.
that none of us are really immune to tragedy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think what makes this case so unsettling is that it happened in a place and time that felt safe.
Yeah.
This wasn't some big city with its dangers. This was Omaha, Nebraska.
Right.
In the mid-'80s, a
Yeah.
place where kids could still, ride their bikes to the store
Right.
without a second thought.
Right.
And yet, even in that place, something terrible happened. It's a reminder that evil can really be anywhere, and the most ordinary places can become the backdrop for something awful.
It makes you wonder, right?
Yeah.
Who could do such a thing? What kind of person would clean a child's clothes, feed them a last meal, and then end their life in such a calculated way?
Right.
It's scary.
It is. It's really hard to understand.
It is. I keep thinking about that wooden box. It's such a small detail, but it feels so important.
Right.
It's like a real representation of all the questions we have.
Yeah.
What happened to it? Where did it go? Could it have the answers?
It might.
Imagine if someone found that box in their attic or at a garage sale.
Yeah.
They might just think it's an old toy box, but for Teresa, it would be a connection to her son,
Absolutely.
a piece of his life that was taken away.
And that's why we have to keep telling Ricky's story,
Yeah.
to keep reminding people that this happened, that the pain is real, and we're still looking for answers.
We can't let cases like this be forgotten.
No.
Every detail matters. Every lead, every question.
Exactly. We have to keep looking for the truth and never give up hope.
If anyone out there has any information about Ricky's case, please contact the Douglas County Sheriff's Office tip line. The number is 402-444-6000 now.
Yeah.
Even if you think it's not important, it could be the missing piece that finally brings justice for Ricky and peace for his family.
You never know. And remember, even in cases like this, there's always hope. Someone knows what happened.
And by keeping his story alive, by asking questions and looking for those answers, we can keep that hope alive.
We can. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into this difficult and unsettling case.
Yeah.
We hope this has made you think about the mysteries in the world.
And if you want to explore more real-life mysteries, be sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay curious, keep asking questions, and never stop looking for the truth.